From beautiful downtown Milwaukee, the mecca of mythicism, it's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show, keeping the all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement. Produced weekly by Mythicist Milwaukee and sponsored by Atheist Community of Milwaukee, Kenosha Racine Atheists and Freethinkers, and King's Tower Productions. The Mythicist Milwaukee Show highlights movers and shakers from the global secular movement and explores the mythic origins of today's major religions. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's another episode, and I am your host, Rob Moore, the Deacon of Doubt, duly designated. With me again after an extended absence is my co-host. He's the brains to my brawn. And I love that brain is actually an acronym or an anagram. I'm not sure which, because you're the brains. He's Brian. Brian, see what I did there? Just switching a vowel.
You did.
And really says a lot about the man. Welcome back. How you been doing?
Pretty good.
He's the friar of free thought in these parts. Also joining us today on the podcast is Wonder Woman herself, Melissa Pugh of the United Coalition for Reason and other various entities, atheist activist, the avenging atheist we like to call her, also a member of the Satanic Temple,
yes,
whose organizers are our special guests today on the show. Joining us from Salem, appropriately enough, is Doug Mesner. Also on the line, Nikki Mungo of the Satanic Temple. Welcome, guys.
hello.
Thanks for joining us. Doug, why don't we start with you? Tell us all about the grand opening that you just went through in Salem. What went down there?
Well, we opened our headquarters doors, the lower level art gallery, to the public for the first time the other day, and we weren't met with people crying and rolling about on the ground in prayer. This was a real relief.
You didn't? Did you expect maybe some disturbance there? And you're lucky to be in New England, where it was actually the 1600s when Salem was acting like that towards people who
1692.
Who thought differently. And you can see as you get further in this west and the south in this country, you get a little bit more backwards as you go. So I love the gimmick of putting it in Salem. It's fantastic. But do you suffer from a lack of publicity because the people are like, atheism?
No, I think the world generally knows that this opened up, but there wasn't a whole lot of local outrage. There's outrage in Russia, and there's outrage in other places, and probably a lot of the American Midwest, but there's not a whole lot of outrage here.
How dare you open Satanist Temple? Evil American capitalist pig. What's the deal?
RT put together a little video where they showed images of our Salem headquarters and then interspersed that with images of burning churches and demons.
Now, let's get the Satanist thing out of the way now. I think everybody here is pretty well acquainted with the fact that you don't really believe in Satan. Give us I love the marketing gimmick. Why don't you give us your story on how you decided to sell what you're selling under the guise of Satanism and what it's really about?
Well, we don't really view it as the guise of Satanism. We see it as Satanism. We see this kind of embrace of heresy and blasphemy as higher callings as being what Satanism should be, and a renunciation of supernaturalism, which we put upon in which we concede over to the Abrahamic religions and the standard traditional religious constructs. But the symbolism, the metaphor of the ultimate rebel against tyranny, that really embodies our deeply held values, and we really feel that we're every bit as deserving of religious privilege or exemption as any other body of deeply held belief that may believe what they believe due to supernatural superstitions.
Yeah. Do you think the outrage, people rolling around in prayer, is that just fear and that they didn't actually look to what you really stand for, or do they just automatically view you as out of control hedonist?
Oh, they love it. They wouldn't have it any other way. They're not going to make us available to correct them on all that they're wrong about when it comes to us. They want us to be that, and you can't engage that type of person in debate. All you can do is laugh at them, and hopefully enough people will laugh at them where they'll feel ridiculous doing what they're doing. But anytime we get we provoke that type of outrage, and it's sustained in that way, you can be sure that they're not listening to what we're actually saying, and it's simply giving them a sense of purpose. They look to align behind a common enemy,
Right.
The angry mob that they are. That's their forte.
Sure. And most of the people, I don't think, that would cringe at the Satanic Temple would roll around and pray. But I would take, your average Christian might think, but if you believe in the supernatural, you're flirting too much with it. That if you really believe in Satan, because you're calling it, that you may summon him to some extent. So they're just cringing. Do you get that kind of opposition?
I think it speaks to the last vestiges of people's superstition in all belief systems, and I think we get a knee-jerk reaction sometimes from other atheists and secularists, and people need to examine why they have this visceral response to the idea of Satanism or the symbols of Satanism. And I really feel that until you can reconcile yourself to those, you're still hanging on to the kind of supernatural suppositions. There is no inherent meaning tacked into symbols. Of course, all symbols are malleable to culture, and I think that's a harder lesson to learn than it is to say, and that it doesn't necessarily stick with people immediately. But I think you learn to repurpose certain symbols or see them how other people might see them. That's expanding your semantic logic at the very least, and probably increasing your social skills even more.
Right, like the swastika being a good example. Right, that reminds people of Nazi Germany, but in older pagan cultures meant something totally different.
And if you're looking at some of the older art that incorporates swastikas, you certainly can't hold 1930s Germany against something that predated that. You may make the argument that it's in poor taste to use the swastika now, given what was done in 1930s Germany. Right. But the difference with satanic symbols is that these allegations against satanic cults and these accusations of satanic cult crimes, they were never true. That was the real hate speech. There was a mob mentality, and Satanism was used as a type of pejorative term to justify the murder of masses of people accused of heresy, accused of consorting with the devil and doing all kinds of depraved deeds. So,
like the Salem witch trials,
kind of symbolism, we're not upholding these standards of conduct that they claim were in place with satanic cults and satanic cult abuse and that kind of thing. I think we're forcing people to reevaluate what they think they know about these things.
Now, you're the founder and current director. Tell us your title.
Yeah, spokesperson.
Nikki is with us as well, and she is not in Salem. Nikki, what's your role in all of this?
Hello there. Yes, I am one of the acting chapter heads for the St. Louis chapter here in Missouri. So I am currently in Missouri right now.
St. Louis have a lot of Satanists?
We have a nice amount here, and interesting enough, they're nice and spread across the state. We have a nice, decent-sized chapter here in St. Louis. We have Springfield satellite chapter, which is, sort of down western, southern Missouri in the corner of the state, next door to Branson, which happens to be the little Vegas, here in the Bible Belt. Yes.
Hell on earth. I like to call it.
Yeah.
Do you find your membership bleeds over with kind of the more traditional kind of atheist groups like ourselves, versus the Satanic Temple? Do people just like that better, or is this just like an existing group with a the kind of this different stick?
Yeah, in the beginning, we certainly seem to be pulling from a lot of the free thought and secular communities in the area because there was a lot of crossover and they seemed to understand. And then, of course, came the development of the understanding of our religion and its, basis and philosophy. And so, once they came to terms with that, and many still consider themselves devout anti-theists, while embracing Satanism as a, valid religion. And then, interesting enough, we do have a few Christians who are interested in joining the pagan community, the Wiccan community. So, lots of interest. I've received support from friends who sort of follow the Southern Baptist Christian sect, and they tend to have the same sort of feelings that we do on matters of separation of church and state. So it winds up being a very diverse and broad sort of interest group.
Wow. I suspect a lot of the people rolling around and opposing would not expect that, Southern Baptists are part of your group.
Well, yeah. And interesting enough, we had a little fight here in my own suburb of St. Louis over a "In God We Trust" plaque being put behind the die at City Hall. And, the people that came out to support our local effort and Baptist members. And so,
if I understand correctly, Barry Lynn is still a Baptist minister, is he not?
Yes. And a woman who came to defend our stance from Americans United, Cynthia Holmes. She's the sweetest little gal you'll ever meet, tiny attorney and a Baptist minister, and also the director here in Missouri for Americans United. So we can't discount, these wonderful allies who it's across the board, so it's a nice thing to know. Yes.
I haven't heard of Americans United. Could you tell me about that briefly?
I know them.
Yeah. Well, if Melissa, you want to go ahead.
Yeah. Barry Lynn is he's the founder, right? President?
I'm not sure. I've only worked mostly with Cynthia. Yeah. And they're a great group. I adore them.
Yeah, so. They are. They don't pick a religious side. They only are for church and separation of church and state. That's it. That's all they.
Yeah, more like an FFRF, just banging away.
Well, FFRF is religious. Yeah. They're atheists, but this group is made of different religions, atheists, Christians, everything.
Oh, I see.
That are for separation of church and state. Yeah.
Nice. Well, we need to get closer with those people. Those
sort of religious bipartisan.
Yeah, exactly.
For secularity, I like it.
Often when I'm debating the religious, and I was doing that, pushing our conference, on Saturday, going to different churches, trying to get them to come to our debate against the Barterman and Robert Price. As long as we can end up on separation church and state, I feel like the debate is over. There's not enough to debate if we can agree on that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the big one for us. And of course, you guys are involved in after-school clubs, which is of particular interest. I know myself and Melissa, too, because we're fighting incursions all the time, not only in the form of the good news clubs and different childhood evangelistic efforts, but just the culture in the public school of every kid being Christian and kind of bringing it up. It's hard to raise your child. I know I have two in the elementary school system, and it's hard to shield them from this sort of wave of religiosity that sort of comes to everybody just by being a member of American society. What is the actual aim of, and I love the work, by the way, the after school club thing is something that we've really wanted to see for a long time. Is it more about prying the Christian clubs out, or do you envision a successful network of actual clubs that teach kids, true science and other actual education?
Well, that should be part of the school curriculum anyway.
Right.
There shouldn't have to be an after-school club coming in, as a religious group in putting forward these values. So really, I think the only plausible, the only good option is for the school districts to come up with some standards of conduct that keep the good news clubs out. I'm not sure if you caught this part of the story, but we're only offering after-school Satan clubs where good news clubs exist. And for people who don't know what the good news clubs are, they're put together by an organization called the Child Evangelism Fellowship. And they're a very fringe, fundamentalist, isolationist, evangelical cult of morons who feel that they need to indoctrinate children into a fear of sin and eternal torment and death. And that they should use the public schools to teach kids to evangelize to other kids and bring them into this fundamentalist way of thinking. They like to try to put forward the idea that they're non-denominational, and that's only true insofar as they'll accept anybody's membership into their club, but then they set to work immediately trying to indoctrinate them into this fundamentalist evangelicalism. So we felt that our own presence, just as self-identified Satanists running a club, would send a message to the children who might not realize that the Good News Club isn't actually a part of the approved curriculum at the schools, that there are various other points of view and that isn't necessarily one being endorsed by the community or the school district. But I really feel that the idea that free speech can't be distinguished from religious speech, even though we distinguish political speech from standard free speech in the school forum all the time, is just really ludicrous, and just as testament to the lousy Supreme Court we had in place in 2001 that ruled in favor of the Good News Clubs versus Milford. And I really think it's time for a reconsideration of that. And I think the after school Satan Club request is really making people think a lot differently about what they can do to keep this from happening. And I offered a solution not too terribly long ago on a Friendly Atheist piece. If they want to say that you can't discriminate against religious speech simply because it's religious, you can at least say that you have standards of conduct that don't allow for proselytization in schools, indoctrination. One of the clever council members in Springfield, Missouri, mentioned that she didn't want organizations with ties to hate clubs or hate groups in the schools. And she apparently thought to label us a hate group, but it turns out the Southern Poverty Law Center actually lists the Liberty Council as a hate group. And the Liberty Council is just the legal arm of the Good News Club and the Child Evangelism Fellowship. So that's a good way of kind of keeping the Good News Clubs out. And we're also clear that it's the Good News Clubs that create a need for the after-school Satan Clubs to be there. So if they were to have standards of conduct in place that kept the Good News Clubs out because of their proselytization and their authoritarian conditioning, these kinds of standards wouldn't keep us out in principle, but we would have no need to be there if the Good News Clubs were gone.
That's a great point. We've discovered one in our region here in Racine at the S.C. Johnson Elementary School in Racine. There is a Good News Club, and so we have found one to fight against.
They're all over the place. They're and it's funny. The Liberty Council. We thought, I'm not sure if you're aware of them. They're the same legal outlet that fought for Kim Davis, the Kentucky County clerk who wouldn't sign the gay marriage licenses. They're just upholding religious freedom and free speech and that type of thing. So to that end, we thought if we experienced pushback in any of the schools, we would ask them if they'd be willing to represent us, or if they would be openly hypocritical and be open about the fact that they're only really fighting for the rights of evangelicals to proselytize wherever they like.
They're the bigot defense.
And it didn't take them long to bear their hypocrisy. They ended up sending letters to at least one of the school districts where we said we wanted to have an after-school Satan Club, offering pro bono support if they were to try to deny us.
Now, you mentioned the Supreme Court decision. How does that get readdressed? Do you understand that process? How would we get that overturned again in the Supreme Court?
It would either after school Satan Club or the Good News Club would have to be denied access into the school, and I think it would have to be in one of the ways I stated a simple change in the standards of conduct that districts put forward in their policies that after-school clubs need to abide by. If either of our groups were fighting against that rejection, I think it would have ramifications for all after-school clubs. But I could see the Good News Clubs fighting against any policy changes that would keep them out and that would abridge their ability to proselytize to children. And I think they would be very willing, the Liberty Council, to take it to the Supreme Court, but I think this time around they would lose.
Probably would. What standards would you recommend? What standards would be fair to set?
If you just don't allow for proselytization and authoritarian conditioning and some of the other basic odious things that the Good News Clubs do, the Good News Clubs couldn't operate. They can't work around that. Their whole purpose is to indoctrinate children. And if you're trying to indoctrinate children to a particular religious point of view, I think that goes beyond any reasonable interpretation of free speech and goes into then an actual First Amendment violation against other people's free exercise, being that when you're in a situation where you can't send your children to school without them being pummeled with religious opinions and being coerced into joining it alongside those, I think that is a limit upon your own free exercise.
I think we should stress that part of the Good News Club strategy and approach is to not only, indoctrinate the children that participate in their after school event, but they send those students back into the classroom to bring other students back with them. And so, they're getting students to go do their indoctrination work for them.
Sure. And that's kind of how they get around the law, basically.
Here in Missouri, it does create a lot of playground issues. So,
like
shall
bullying,
we call it? So,
bullying.
Yes, absolutely.
That happened with one of my friends. He got this little boy's been raised secular his whole life, and he goes on the playground and tells his friends he doesn't believe in God, and he got into a fight. That's ridiculous.
Yep. It's a common story here in the Bible Belt for
that was in Georgia. So
raised with a naturalist worldview, and they feel comfortable, hopefully expressing that, but it's not always the case. So,
now, what other kind of backlash do you get, Nikki, being in the heartland and being more in the Bible Belt than Salem, which is in liberal Massachusetts?
Right. Well, I've been in my community for a long time, and I've been an activist here for a while. So, people are already kind of used to me, and I think tolerated fairly well in my community. In the city of St. Louis, it's not as easy as one might think. It tends to be a fairly progressive city, but, for instance, right now, our LGBTQI community does not feel safe taking mass transit, especially our trans community, which is pretty much being targeted right now by Westboro. Different areas of the state, you're going to run into different reactions. I'm sure you can imagine in more rural areas, it becomes a much bigger issue to publicly identify as a Satanist. So I have it easy compared to others, but then again, I also have a very good home security system and, watchful neighbors as well. So, it's difficult here in the Bible Belt. I'll just put it that way.
No statue of
earlier at the beginning, you guys had mentioned something about calling it a gimmick, and I get your sort of understanding with that. But here, where we are, it's what we do is quite serious. I know it has sort of a funny component, and that is just a byproduct of very serious, passionate religious intent on our part. So what we do, yes, I know it provides a laugh for some others, but our cases here in Missouri are very real, and so is the risk involved with that. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
No Baphomet statue on your front lawn yet?
I wouldn't mind. I would actually love to talk to the sculptor about creating a Baphomet wine fountain. I think that would be
awesome.
More fun. And I would like the dark red wine for that.
Nice. We have a guy that shares our space here where we do the podcast from, creates bobbleheads. I'm wondering, can we get some Baphomet bobbleheads? Wouldn't that be great? Right? But tell us about the idea. Why, Doug, why not Satan as statues? Well, where's the Satan statue? Why Baphomet? Why is Baphomet necessarily the mascot of the group and not Satan?
What's a better image for Satan? Pan?
I'm asking you, my friend.
Right, because I think the Baphomet picture that you guys are using was created in like the mid 1800s. Because I looked before that, and there's different versions. And why do you like this one? Why is it cool?
Well, the name Baphomet cropped up in the 13th century during the Knights Templar heresy trials. They were said to be worshiping Baphomet, but at that time there were no illustrations. There was this idea that it was some two-headed beast or whatever, but the academics, the historians, feel almost certain that Baphomet came from Mahomet or Muhammad, prophet of Islam, because the Templars were fighting the Crusades against Muslims at the time. Muslims were Satanized. But it's always the gods of old that are kind of co-opted into the demonology, and the image of the sabbatical goat was incorporated into the Baphomet image that Eliphas Levi drew a picture of in the 19th century, and it's been kind of a primary Satanized icon since then, which I like better than the pan as Satan image or the red guy image.
Yeah, in the same way that the Wahhabis satanize the Yazidis. It seems like they're doing that to them.
Was Baphomet?
Yeah, but with Baphomet, the binary elements make it a very powerful message, I think,
I like that.
Especially for what we're doing. We're setting it alongside the Ten Commandments because it has this embodiment of so many opposites. You notice we have the star 1 point up on the head of the goat, and behind it, it's the 2 point up pentagram. It's pointing up and it's pointing down. It's supposed to be hermaphroditic, part male and female. We have a male and female sculpture on each side. It's part animal, it's part human. It has the caduceus of negotiation and reconciliation. So we're trying to capture that symbolism of the reconciliation of the opposites and set our Satanic Monument alongside the Ten Commandments Monument to show
debate between Robert Price and
diametrically opposed
coming
points
up on
of view
October
can still
21st at historic
coexist
Turner Hall in downtown
so long
Milwaukee.
as no one is
Milwaukee
claiming a
would like to thank the
monopoly
sponsors of Myth Information
upon the
Conference
public
3.
forum.
Freedom
I
from
think it all
Religion
works,
Foundation,
and I'm
the
guessing
Sophia
that there
Wolf
probably just
Quadracci
wasn't
Memorial
quite as
Fund for
cool
stem cell research,
statues
Edwin
of
Herbert,
the
author
author
of
of
Mythos Christos, Atheist Alliance of
Maybe.
America,
Well,
Atheist
I'll tell
Republic,
the
Godless
Baphomet
Engineering,
Monument is,
Kenosha
by
Racine,
any
Atheists and
objective
Free Thinkers,
standard,
Atheist Community
light
of
years
Milwaukee,
better than
and Polaris
these
Financial.
ugly tombstone-like Ten Commandments slabs.
Agreed 100%.
Right.
I saw it in person. It's stunning.
Now, do you guys,
It's
Christians, of course, famously Christians, baptized? Do you guys Baphometize?
You know what? I want to set up we need to set up like an unbaptism station or something at the gallery here so people can come and have that kind of takeaway.
Yeah, that's great.
Get them Baphometized.
He's feeling the creativity today.
I love it. No, I think the
Unbaptized.
the Sunday Assembly does
wasn't asked.
debaptisms, I think.
I wasn't asked when I was baptized.
No?
Or do we use a blow dryer instead of like a tub of water? Like to
Yeah, these guys have the temple.
There's all these ideas for fire, but there's the issue of open flame in this place.
Baptizing.
We need to see. It doesn't look like we're going to get pushback from local officials, but definitely everything needs to be by the book over here.
Yeah, for sure. And you're lucky to be, I think, in Salem and in Massachusetts. How many outlets are there? We've got Melissa right here. She's a member. I don't know. You can tell us what you had to go through for initiation later. But how many chapters are there worldwide or nationwide, or like how big are we now?
I don't know, Nikki. How big are we now?
We're really, really big. I think, the last I'd read was something online, and that was, what, Doug, a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe 20,000, had signed up for membership at least through the online sign up.
Oh yeah. We're more than double that now. But I was wondering, what's our actual count on chapters now?
On chapter members.
Not just chapters themselves, because I know we have green-lighted the Netherlands recently. And we were sitting on some others. Nikki's part of our national council too, so sometimes when I'm off running about working on other things, she might have a better sense of where we are. So,
I hope so. I don't know, maybe not, but some of them are growing so fast that it's just kind of impossible to keep up with their numbers. But I would say at least in the United States, 300, 400 more.
And
that's people, not number of chapters.
Right. Members, collectively through chapters.
I mean, that's sizable. And I think, to your point, a gimmick isn't going to get that many people. Maybe really what a better point for that would be counterpoint, that's what you are. I mean, because what does Satan mean to the average believer, the father of lies, the embodiment of evil, the tempter? But I think that the image of Satan means something different to you, and that interpretation is the same way. I mean, you can interpret Satan as like the rebel. And I just want to know, what does that mean to you? Like, how do you interpret that? Like, obviously you don't think that, you guys are the embodiment of evil. You're clearly not. What does Satan mean to you?
Yeah, it's that embodiment of the rebellious spirit, even in the face of prevalent societal norms, recognizing what's right for what's right because it's right, rather than the symbolism that's attached to it. in that willingness to stand on the outside like that and be made a pariah for your values.
Right. Dissent should be celebrated in some ways.
I think some people see it all in negative terms, that this is all a revolt against something. But in actuality, we have our own affirmative values. And in a lot of ways, we're not paying attention to what the other people are doing. We're seeing what doors are being opened by our so-called opposition. And we're just reminding them that those doors are open for us as well.
The doors are open to the big debate on October 21st at Turner Hall in downtown Milwaukee, where Robert Price will debate Bart Ehrman, two of the premier New Testament theologians, historic scholars of great magnitude. Brian will be debating the actual historicity of Jesus. Remember to get your tickets for Myth Information Conference 3, featuring the big debate between Robert Price and Bart Ehrman, coming up on October 21st at historic Turner Hall in downtown Milwaukee. Mythicist Milwaukee would like to thank the sponsors of Myth Information Conference 3, Freedom from Religion Foundation, Sophia Wolf Quadracci Memorial Fund for Stem Cell Research, Edwin Herbert, author of Mythos Christos, Atheist Alliance of America, Atheist Republic, Godless Engineer, Kenosha Racine Atheists and Freethinkers, Atheist Community of Milwaukee, and Polaris Financial. Tell the folks where they can get their tickets.
On mythicistmilwaukee.com, go to debate series under Buzz Belief, and you can buy them right there. Credit card, PayPal. I'm sure I would get beat by both of these guys in a debate, but I really want to see where I'm at. I mean, I would say I'm a mythicist, but I'm never going to be able to defend that position as well as Robert Price.
No, not even close. And I couldn't defend it as well as you could. So imagine how lost some of us are when it comes to the actual information that you're going to get imparted upon you. You got something, Melissa?
Yeah, I was just going to ask the two of you. I saw the what is it? The Lisa Ling show on CNN. What is it called? This is This is Life.
American Life or
no?
It's a Lisa Ling show. You know what? I forget too. But yeah, Lisa Ling did a 45-minute documentary about us for CNN that just re-aired, I think,
I just saw it.
Ago.
Yeah, I just saw it. And that was the one in Detroit. And yes, people were nuts. There were groups of different churches all around. They had to do a diversion, so the people thought they were in one place and they were actually in another. And it was just insane watching these people go completely crazy. He was talking about people rolling around on the floor.
It's better than that. Our first location that we emailed the people to go for the event, we actually had them go there for a preliminary security check. But to keep the real religious zealots away, we made them sign their souls away to Satan on the contract before they would be given the actual location of the event.
Nice.
That's brilliant.
Is that where St. Michael was?
Yeah, that was the guy who brought a big, huge statue of St. Michael.
Yeah, how big was the font there? That I love that idea that you would have to sign your soul away to Satan. I mean, you're actually getting something for it at this point. But did you have that big, or is that nice and small? Like that, I want to see that piece of paper. I really do.
It wouldn't work if they couldn't see it, right? They have to notice it.
I've still got it in my files. I've still got it somewhere floating around here. Utah actually used that text for an event not too terribly long ago.
You've sold me on the fact that you are a religion and you're passionate about that philosophy that you all embrace. Is there, in fact, a liturgy? Is there a priest? Is there a church service? Is there some kind of liturgy? Really, is the word?
Or holy relics?
Holy relics. Yeah. Is there a reliquary that you guys have?
I think it's a mark of the old, complacent, stale religions that they're populated with people who neither understand nor derive anything from the rituals they engage in. It's just a rote practice. And I really feel there's, weddings and things like that, those are legitimate rituals. They kind of mark a moment of time. They're a celebration of a certain event that you want to set aside and commemorate. But beyond that, I feel ritual practice should be malleable to the events that it's meant to address. I'm all for the protest variety rituals or the very directed rituals that have just their one place in time, like the Pink Mass event that we did, where we had the homosexual couples do some ritualistic gaying upon the tombstone of Fred Phelps's mother's grave.
Nice.
Ultimately, I put my testicles on her grave and we declared her a lesbian. But that I kind of think that kind of performance arty ritual is really what a ritual should be. It should have a goal, it should have a purpose, it should have a function, and it should be interesting to see.
I agree. So no weekly indoctrination ritual, which is really what those amount to in regular churches.
Well, in the Catholic Church, the Apostles' Creed, could you crank that out, or do you kind of have to be there and be pulled along with it? Right. How much does that really mean if you asked an average Catholic?
It's authoritarian conditioning. It's the stand up, sit down, the repeat after me, and all that bullshit. Yep. That's exactly the kind of thing we reject when we come here, and it would be, it would be against our best interests, I think, to start emulating that.
And that way you don't have to bother coming up with a service either.
Sure, but we definitely want our ministry. And we have, some of us are ordained now, and this has been a very slow process getting it together. But I do want to, with the Salem headquarters, we're also going to put together ordination coursework so we can be sure that people who represent us in the ministry truly understand the historical context, the cultural context of what we're doing, and the purpose of what we're doing, the legal issues, the whole current lay of the land.
Oh, that's excellent.
Politics and religion.
That's what I was getting at. So you will, in fact, have ministers of Satanism.
Yeah, and we talked about, and I've been talking with one of our very few ordained ministers who's taking thanatology classes to do end-of-life counseling, and she was recommending things like marriage dissolution ceremonies, things that people don't usually have in other religious denominations, that there's a real need for, that people need to kind of reconcile themselves to the end of that type of relationship and move on. And that kind of event might be able to do that kind of thing. Similar to how a wedding is a useful thing ritualistically, but you don't have to believe in the supernatural. And I think that's still kind of an uphill battle with us for some of the atheists and secularists, that they're just as quick to renounce the usefulness of metaphor or the power of literature, poetry, and art to illuminate. And I think I think most of the people who are compelled towards Satanism have a much higher respect for aesthetics and art, and have little care for whether or not somebody else will feel that they take it literally or not. I feel we've progressed beyond that, and I really don't care what the literalist inclinations are of some other simpletons who might look at us in the wrong way.
He's Doug Mesner, a.k.a. Lucian Greaves, joining us today on the Mythicist Milwaukee Show, along with Nikki Moongo of the Satanist to Satanic Temple. The Satanic Temple. And it is time now for a little feature we like to call Myth of the Day. Joining us with devilishly good myths today is our own Mythmeister, Antonio Desconocido. ¿Cómo está, Tony?
Todo bien, all good. Typhon, also known as Set or Seth, is the god of desert and darkness who betrays his brother Osiris, and who is depicted by the pyramid texts as battling with Horus, who avenges his father. In later texts, Seth is said to have sent a snake or scorpion to sting and kill Horus, as on the Metternich Stela. Quote, Horus, being the sun or the light, had an enemy known as Set, and Set was the personification of the darkness or night. And metaphorically speaking, every morning Horus would win the battle against Set, while in the evening Set would conquer Horus and send him into the underworld. It is important to note that dark versus light, or good versus evil, is one of the most ubiquitous mythological dualities ever known, and it is still expressed on many levels to this date. Zeitgeist. The similarity of the Osiris-Set conflict with that of the Jesus-Satan battles is highlighted by historian Dr. Philip Van Ness Myers. Quote, the god Set, called Typhon by the Greek writers, was the Satan of later Egyptian mythology. He was the personification of the evil in the world, just as Osiris was the personification of the good. And that is our myth of the day.
Thank you, Antonio Desconocido. I personally prefer seitan, the Japanese tofu derived non-meat entree ingredient.
The Muslims call it shaitan. I think that sounds a little cooler. But I mean, these guys are the Satanic Temple, certainly not the embodiment of evil. I mean, I keep thinking of my Catholic upbringing and reading the Apostles' Creed so many times, and I'm looking on the back of the card that Melissa gave me, and it's the values. I'll read two of them. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. That's something that I wouldn't mind shouting out every week. Another, belief should conform to our best scientific understanding of the world. We should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit our beliefs. Again, that's something that's I think ritualistic to say every week to remind ourselves. Yeah, those are good ideas.
He wanted to get away from ritual, man.
These are if we're going to do ritual. This is a ritual worth doing.
I think it's a fantastic gig. It's rationalistic. It's evidence based. It's about knowledge and questioning authority, which I think we can all get behind.
But I mean, yes, I just wish that some of these, they're supposed to be Satan's supposed to be the embodiment of evil. But I'm looking at the back of this card. And which I sometimes do, have to go to Catholic churches occasionally to keep the peace, I wouldn't mind saying this out loud rather than, we believe.
Do you have
in
bionic
one
implants that you were able to see that font? That is tiny writing, man. You're a young, virile man still. I have to say. This Doug Mesner guy doesn't strike me as a dude who suffers fools very easily, but I'm going to have to ask, because I'm sure he deals with it and he's sick of dealing with it, as you all are probably. What you guys are obviously not the Church of Satan, the Anton LaVey bit that is more like the embodiment of evil. They would really worship Satan as a creature, I think, as a deity. How does that really bug you, or do you have to deal with it every time you bring up what you do, or what goes on there?
I'm kind of surprised that anybody mentions them at all. They haven't done anything, and
I dated myself by even bringing it up, didn't I? Yeah.
I feel like 30 years or more.
I'm sorry,
they're
Rob.
really just an online group of kind of pseudo neo-Nazi morons. So I don't know. I think as time goes on, people ask us about them less and less because I think people realize they're not active.
Yeah, that's a great point.
They're nowhere to be found.
I wouldn't have known that they're not active. They were when I was in college. It was a thing, and some kids had the book. And
in the 80s.
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, that's when the Satanic Panic happened.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, it went right along with the whole
80s and 90s.
Reagan and the Blue Bloods coming in, and everything got so conservative that kind of knee-jerk reaction from the born agains.
Oh yeah.
It went perfectly.
Even Kiss was supposed to be kings in Satan's service. I mean, instead of just like a glam band.
Dumb name for a glam band. Oh.
I'm working on a permanent exhibit for the Salem Art Gallery in relation to the Satanic Panic. And I want to put together a whole display of subliminal messages that people were finding in that time that were supposed to be related to Satanism, or especially there seemed to be this mortal fear that there was hidden pornography and everything. And there was this guy, Wilson Bryan Key, and he was an expert witness in the Judas Priest trial. And I don't know if you're really aware of the Judas Priest trial.
No, we're not.
There were two kids shot themselves with a shotgun after listening to the album Stained Class by Judas Priest. And Judas Priest ended up being taken on trial by their parents, who were suing for some $6 million. And one of the expert witnesses was this expert in subliminal messages who was saying that these backward messages in the Judas Priest music were compelling kids to kill themselves, and that the art on the album cover, which showed this kind of metallic head with what looked like some metal rod running through it, was a clear subliminal message that you should shoot yourself with a shotgun, apparently.
Wow.
But
seems obvious.
And
but
what
naturally,
happened?
they were playing these little clips of where the backwards messages were supposed to be in the courtroom. There's a documentary about it. I forget what it's called, but you hear these clips, and any reasonable person can't hear any message. But then again, any reasonable person wouldn't think that your mind is going to reconstruct a backwards message subconsciously and then act upon it. So that's not even a rational proposition to begin with. The case was ultimately thrown out, but that little kind of cottage industry for a time about subliminal messaging, and the fear about it was very prevalent. And it's something we laugh at now when we look at it. I need to set up a better display for that here, because I think it is very amusing to see, especially when you have that kind of pareidolia effect. A guy like Wilson Bryan Key looking at pictures of ice cubes and advertisements, and he feels in the shadows you can see the clear dick or vagina that he was sure was going to ruin the world if people subliminally made that out of it.
It was in Camel cigarettes too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, Camel cigarettes. I think behind the Camel it was supposed to be a man with a boner.
Doug, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, they put people in jail that were in jail for half their lives.
No, that was West Memphis 3.
West Memphis 3 that Johnny Depp actually got involved in.
They eventually
but they
got
used the accusation of Satanism primarily,
Satanism.
as though everybody knows
Satanists.
what that means, and as though there's a clearly known doctrine that calls for this type of ritualistic murder from satanic organizations, and it never existed. And that's why I really want our exhibit in Salem to look closer at the modern satanic panic, because everybody recognizes the 17th century Salem witch trials, but they don't recognize that the satanic panic of our own lifetimes, most of us, was on that same continuum, and that it was really not only metaphorically a witch hunt. It was a literal witch hunt in the modern era.
Absolutely.
It's actually a good
secular
point.
halls of justice. People were being accused essentially of supernatural crimes and having their lives ruined for them.
Being in prison for
and
18
in your
years.
and I can see a lot of people saying, "Well, knowing that they're Satanists, that's guilty enough for me," and then you don't look into it. You know that it a lot of times if you've got popular opinion on your side,
right?
That's big.
Yeah, he's cut and dry guilty, before you're even tried. Yeah.
Right. I feel like with our activism, that's something we're taking away, and that can only be for the better. We're going to make it a lot harder for people to say, well, he's guilty because he's a Satanist. I think more and more when these things happen, there's going to be some questions about what kind of Satanist are you talking about? What kind of evidence do you have? What do you think you know about Satanism?
Yes, and the next expert
you just start
witness.
asking those basic questions, the accusations all start falling apart.
Yeah, I would think the next expert witness would have to talk about what you're doing and what the Satanic Temple means, and would be an awesome counterpoint to that if it would ever come up again.
Right. And so somebody could then make the argument, well, there's different types of Satanists, and this is a different, whatever this homicidal breed of Satanist is, they're somehow separate and distinct. But I think that you would then have to justify this by pointing to some kind of doctrine, pointing to some kind of society that actually subscribes to this. And that, I mean, you would think those things would have happened anyway, but they didn't. And I think in that way, it makes us kind of a much broader variety of the Anti-Defamation League.
It's much like what we go through as atheists. It's the same way. The atheist demographic is vilified as well as Satanists, and here people clearly don't have any idea what either term signifies.
Yeah, even as an atheist activist, I've been told by family members to not align myself with the word Satan because it's just going to give me a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. No, sorry, that's not the way my brain works. I read things.
So, Nikki, tell us, how do people get involved? Where do they go? What do they do? How do they find out about the temple and how to join?
Well, one of the first things they can do is check our website and see if there is a chapter in their area. We do have a mostly up-to-date section on our website that will let them know where to check in at. If there's not, they can write National Council, which can also be found on our website, the email for that, and let us know that they're interested in possibly putting a chapter together in their area. We have a huge influx of those, so we do ask that people bear with us as we sort through them. And then it's just a fairly simple process from there, and we can fill them in on all of the necessary things that need to happen to pull this off.
So can someone
one here? We need a chapter here.
Audit an event? I mean, you can go there once, just meet some people and check it out? I mean, how would someone do that?
Absolutely. Most of the active chapters will have public meetings and public events. And once you find your, local chapter, just follow their webpage, or some of them have their own websites as well. And they'll be posting all of their public events and what they've got going on, either on Facebook or their websites.
That sounds awesome.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, you guys.
I mean,
Thank
the
you.
Satanic Temple.
Thank you for having us.
No, not at all. And keep up the great work. It's Nikki Mungo and Lucian Greaves. He's Doug Mesner. Great job, both of you. Thanks for joining us. Join us next week again for another episode, everybody, and take care.
All right, take care, everyone.
The Mythicist Milwaukee Show is brought to you by Mythicist Milwaukee. Producer Sean Frasek. Associate producer Melanie Lawson. Engineer Jason Lawson. Mythmeister Antonio Blandone. Researcher Kristen Whitaker-Hood. Closing theme written and performed by Shelley Siegel. On behalf of co-host Brian Edward and the entire team, I'm Rob Moore reminding you to keep it safe and keep it secular.